Right, let's look at benchmarking next. So, the ongoing process of measuring against the best performing either internal department or region, competitor, or the top performing organization from any industries. We call that best in class. So benchmarking is useful. It provides information for our SWOT analysis. It really allows us to understand whether it is a strength or a weakness. So whether we're really good at it, okay at it, or bad at it. So if our customers are giving us 4 out of 5 stars for our customer service, is that good or bad? We need to compare ourselves to somebody else. Develop strategies for improved performance of weak areas. So if we are bad at customer service, then and another company is better, then they provide a bit of a blueprint for us that we can look at them and go, well, what are they doing that we're not doing, and let's copy that. Identify ways to utilize strengths and better meet strategic objectives. So if it turns out that we do have a strength, one of the things you could do is actually use it in your marketing. So like Lidl, keep going back to supermarkets because we all go shopping, so it's an easy one to understand. So Lidl will benchmark the average price of a basket of goods at Lidl compared to, like, I think the poster I saw was Sainsbury's. And so they then were able to say, well, it costs you 80 quid to buy the same stuff in Lidl that it costs you 100 quid to buy in Sainsbury's. Let's put a poster and do a whole advertising campaign around that. And so, understanding your strengths and then using them in marketing. So benefits helps identify areas of weak performance, so you don't know what you're bad at. Assist in setting realistic, practical targets. So if somebody else can do it, you can do it too. You're not just reaching for the moon. Learn from the best, right? So identifying ways of improving. Encourages continuous improvement. So if you're comparing, it's like hopefully it comes out with healthy competition, right? So we always want to be better than the other guy. And so we're constantly watching them and making sure that we are better than them and we're winning. Limitations, so identifying a critical process that would benefit from benchmarking could be difficult. So when you embark on a benchmarking exercise, it's very hard to say exactly what it is you want to improve. You can end up with lots of scope creep, we call it. Just as a simple example, if you have a house and you do your kitchen up, and you think, oh my god, the kitchen looks great now, and everything else looks really bad. I know, we'll have to repaint the living room, and then you repaint the living room and think, oh my god, the dining room, the carpet needs doing in there, and so you just end up trying to improve loads of different things. And the same problem with this benchmarking exercise is you need to be very specific on what it is, the process that you're trying to improve. How to obtain information, so especially if it's a competitor, they're not going to share. If they're doing something better than you, they're not going to go, oh, this is how we do it. That would be too easy. Aims to match best practice rather than exceed it. So we want to win, right? We want a competitive advantage. We don't just want to be as good as the other company. And benchmarking doesn't necessarily help with that. May appear critical towards staff and create blame culture. So we hope it results in healthy competition. We can do internal benchmarking and compare different departments to each other. The problem is that the department that's maybe not doing as well could see this as an attack, a criticism on them. Costs can be high and may exceed the benefit. I think it's just generally a good point to consider with any of these models. Anytime you're looking to make a change, is cost and benefit. That's a good talking point. So in terms of benchmarking, so use the benchmark within the company itself. So works well with large organizations, wouldn't work very well with a small organization. Best performing profit center or branch or division, that would be a baseline. The other units are compared, and then hopefully we can take what that branch is doing really, really well and apply it to the other parts of the business. Could use a league table approach, so ranking. One of my students actually told me they worked in McDonald's, and on the board, or there was a screen and it actually displayed the top performing McDonald's in the area, and so they could see whether they were the busiest one or not on that particular day. So benefits helps identify and replicate best practice. So identify best practice within the business, and it should be relatively easy to replicate that because theoretically everyone's got the same equipment and same training and things like that. Informs plans to improve weaker areas. So hopefully we raise the performance of everyone. They say a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So if we identify the weaker link and make that link stronger, the whole company, the chain should become stronger. League tables can foster competition and create desire to improve. So yeah, I think seeing that screen actually made it quite like, oh, let's get more sales in because we want to beat that. And I think it's because it was a screen. It was like sort of a nameless, faceless thing. It didn't necessarily get negative because it wasn't another group of people that you were competing with. It was just a name on a screen. Availability of detailed information. So you'll be able to gather very, very good information if you're doing internal benchmarking. Criticism. So managers may be assessed on factors outside their control. The size of the organization, the resources available. Performance may be affected by regional factors. So again, that sort of links with outside their control. League tables can be demotivating for the weaker teams. If you're always at the bottom of the league, then eventually you're just going to go, what's the point? And league tables may encourage manipulation or hiding of information. So yeah, there's always a risk that people would try and make themselves look better than they are. Okay, so how would I use these things right now? With any of these things, I think it's worthwhile thinking about preparing for the exam, right? And so with benchmarking, it's like I would like you to be able to explain what benchmarking is. We've discussed the technical marks, the theory marks, 20% are for theory. So that's how you're going to get your theory marks. For any of these types of benchmarking, so internal, I'd like you to be able to ideally explain it as well, and then tell me 2 good things and 2 bad things. So I find the notes, the PowerPoints, they always give you more than you really need for the marks. Like I always have like a 10-mark question in my head when I'm thinking about preparing for the exam. So for me, if you can tell me what benchmarking is, that gets you a mark. If you can tell me if you can identify the type of benchmarking, right, like internal, that gets you a mark. And then you can tell me 2 good things about it and 2 bad things about it, then that's 2 marks, 2 marks. Now we're on 6 marks out of 10, right, which is a healthy pass. You need 50%, so 6 out of 10, 60%. And then I would hope that from the scenario, you can maybe pick out another couple of ideas that you could then apply. You could apply these benefits, these criticisms to the scenario, and that's going to get you another couple of marks. Now you're up to 8 marks, right? So don't feel like you have to memorize all of this. For any of these things, I think 2 benefits, 2 criticisms will be fine. I'll let you pick which ones you want to memorize out of the 4 benefits there. Pick 2, 4 criticisms, pick 2. And you're going to do that for all of these. So competitive benchmarking. So comparative performance to a successful competitor. We're aiming to identify why they're doing better than us, why they're more successful. Again, looking to improve, replicate what they've done, or possibly try and do it better. So maybe there's scope for even more improvement. So product benchmarking, so obtaining the most successful product in the market. So how is the product designed or constructed? So I guess a bit of reverse engineering there. Strengths and weaknesses of the design, likely costs, right? So coming up with an estimate of what we think it will cost them to make, and the features. So what is it the customers really like about them? And then we can add those to our product. Functional benchmarking, so a specific function within the business. So it could be marketing, could be research and development, could be accounting, IT. So what does the competitor does that makes the function successful? So why is their sales and marketing so good? And again, trying to make improvements, because that's a key thing that keeps coming up. Benchmarking isn't just comparing ourselves, it's trying to improve ourselves as well. So competitive benchmarking, pros and cons. Again, try and pick a couple of pros, a couple of cons. Well, there you go, there's only a couple of cons, that works well. So pros helps to identify why competitors are more successful. Knowledge can be used to create a strategic plan to close the gap, right? So we can take away their competitive advantage by doing this. So we can't necessarily beat it. We hope we can, but at least they won't be much better than us. They'll be the same as us from now on. Easy to obtain and analyze competitor products, and hopefully we've got some insider knowledge here because we're in the same industry. Cons: hard to use to improve systems. Competitors not really likely to share information. It might close the gap, but it doesn't give you a competitive advantage. That would be a downside. So process benchmarking. So here we're looking at a specific activity, similar to functional, but a bit more detailed, right? So functional is looking at the entire customer service department or function. Here you can see we're looking at, say, customer complaint handling or after sales or distribution. So aspects of customer service, you could say, more detailed. Similar to functional, may benchmark the process against either a competitor or best in class from an unrelated industry. So there was an example of an airline in the US, and they wanted to get better at refueling their planes. And they looked around at the competitors, and they were the fastest ones in the industry, which the problem with that is then there's no point in comparing to anybody else because they're not going to make you any faster. So they were like, okay, well, who else could we look at who's really fast at refueling things? And they looked at an F1 pit crew, right? Because the car stops and they have to get fuel in within it's less than 10 seconds normally, isn't it? So they looked at this F1 pit crew, and they were able to reduce the refueling times by a third by taking the lessons they learned from that F1 pit crew, right? They were just the best in the class. The airline didn't care that they weren't in the same industry, and they were able to cut their refueling times by a third. Because apparently that's a bit of a bottleneck for planes, is when they're on the ground, the reason that they just land and take off again, because that's really what the airline would want, right? Just as many hours in flying as possible, because you're going to get tons of money for that asset. Fuel, it takes a long time to get all that fuel in. So the quicker you can refuel them, the quicker you can turn them around, the more flights they can do, the more revenue you can generate. So pros of best-in-class benchmarking is the way I think about this. So it's an unrelated industry, so they shouldn't hide the ball. They should be willing to cooperate because it's not going to cost them anything. In fact, I mean, the F1 pit crew probably would be happy to do it if they'll probably just charge you some money for it. Many processes transcend industry. So the customer complaint handling, it doesn't matter whether you're a bank or a supermarket or an airline, it's going to be really, really similar. Learning from the best, so replicate best practice or gain ideas for process redevelopment using a unique approach. I think what I'd summarize that as saying it's much more innovative than any of the other ones. So internal, you're only going to get as best as your best branch. Competitive, you're only going to get as good as your competitor. This one, best in class, this is the one that could give you a competitive advantage because you're going to probably come up with something unique that your competitors don't do. Cons, so the process benchmarking agreement involves sharing information in both directions, so they might ask you questions, so there's a bit of a risk that they might learn from you. May be hard to find a partner willing to enter the agreement as both will need assurance they can learn from the other. So I'd say hard to find the right one. And the other con I would probably add to that list is it can be very expensive and there's no guarantee that it will succeed. If I think about fueling an airplane and fueling an F1 car, it would be hard. It's like, is it going to work? Is it going to be anything I can learn that will come across? I mean, the only way I can know is to do it. But so it can be, I think out of all of them, it can be the risky. But risk and reward, right? So riskiest one, but the one that can give you the best possible return. Other types of benchmarking. So we've got strategic benchmarking. So it compares our strategy to our competitors or different industries, determining why our strategy is effective or why their strategy is effective. Looks at elements such as the objectives, technology, core competencies, and capabilities. So I think a good example of strategic benchmarking at the moment would be, So in the UK, we've got AA, which is a roadside recovery service. And there's a big move in the car market from combustion engines to electric vehicles. So if I'm AA, I would have to have a plan, a strategy for how I'm going to transition my roadside services from combustion engines to electric vehicles, which I'm guessing will have different problems and require different equipment and different training and things like that. So if I'm AA, I might compare myself to, I might benchmark, say, against Volkswagen, right? So Volkswagen have said we're only going to sell electric vehicles by 2035. So AA could go, well, I guess we'll aim to have 80-90% of our vehicles and our staff trained to deal with electric vehicles in a similar time frame, 2035. And we could also compare ourselves to the RAC, which is another roadside recovery in the UK, and we'll read their published strategic documents and see what they're planning to do about electric vehicles and see whether we think our plan is better than theirs or not. So that'd be an example of strategic benchmarking. Customer benchmarking, so comparing actual performance with customer expectations. So how did we do compared to what you thought we were going to do? Collecting data should hopefully be easier because it's our customers rather than our competitors. Although, I don't know about you, but I don't tend to fill in many surveys I get sent. So I think a 2% response rate is pretty standard. So 2 customers out of 100 you ask will give you an answer. May help to improve the product, services or systems, so distribution, and in a way that our competitors aren't doing. So, makes sense to ask our customers. However, the data provided may not be specific enough for major improvements. So the customers might make vague comments like, oh, it wasn't as I expected, or it could have been better. That's going to be hard to implement. So what does good benchmarking look like? Successful benchmarking. Select a process performance that are crucial for success. So you want to focus on, the phrase that's often used is critical success factors. So like if I run a restaurant, a critical success factor, well, 2 that spring to mind would be customer service and cooking the food, right? I know they'd be obvious, but it's okay. You can state the obvious in the exam. Payroll would not be a critical success factor. So I wouldn't bother benchmarking how good I am at payroll, but I would bother benchmarking how good I am at, say, getting the food out to the customers. How long does it take me compared to other restaurants? Ongoing or regular, so it's not a one-off exercise. You need to implement these lessons and then monitor to make sure they've actually worked. So you have to measure it again. So it's a continuous process, continuous improvement. Open and honest about information sharing. So you could say it requires a culture. You have to sort of instill in the staff, like, look, we're not asking you these questions so you get in trouble. We're asking these questions so we understand the business and we can make improvements. These will not come back to bite you, which requires a lot of trust from the staff. So that's a cultural thing. Aim to outperform, not just catch up with competitors, right? So, you might catch up with them when you do competitive benchmarking, but then you need to push further and go for that best in class so you can keep, you're going to start down this road and it's a continuous process. It's going to cost lots of money. The return on my investment is going to be winning, beating the competition, not just being as good as them.